The maintenance bay of Forward Base Titan hummed with the familiar sounds of generators and air recyclers, creating a mechanical lullaby that David Park had grown to appreciate during his solitary night shifts. Most of the base's 3,000 personnel were asleep by this hour, leaving him alone with the equipment that kept them all alive. He preferred it this way: no urgent repair requests, no officers demanding miracle fixes for impossible deadlines, just him and the honest work of maintaining humanity's war machine. Tonight felt different, though. As he completed his routine inspection of the heavy weapons maintenance station, something caught his eye in the far corner of the bay. A set of battle armor sat propped against the wall like a discarded shell, its surface telling a story of violence that made David's chest tighten with sympathy. He'd never seen Valdari armor up close before. The alien alloy gleamed dully under the harsh LED work lights, its organic curves and flowing lines a stark contrast to the angular efficiency of human military gear. But it was the damage that drew his attention. Plasma burns had melted through sections of the chest plate, kinetic impacts had cratered the shoulder guards, and what looked like claw marks scored deep gouges across the helmet's faceplate. David approached slowly, his mechanics eye cataloging the destruction with professional interest. Most techs would have written this off as scrap metal, suitable only for material reclamation. The bioneural interfaces were fried, the servo-assisted joints had seized with battle damage, and the whole thing looked like it had been through a ship's engine turbine. But David saw potential where others saw waste. 20 years of fixing broken things had taught him to look past surface damage to the underlying structure, and this armor's framework was solid. More than solid. It was beautiful, with the kind of engineering elegance that human manufacturers spent fortunes trying to replicate. He knew whose armor this had to be. Commander Silasthara was the only Valdari officer stationed at Forward Base Titan, a tactical genius whose reputation had preceded her arrival 6 months ago. David had glimpsed her occasionally in the mess hall or during base briefings, tall and graceful, with the crystalline skin that marked her species shifting through muted grays and blues. She always sat alone, spoke only when directly addressed, and maintained the kind of professional distance that others interpreted as arrogance. David had a different theory. He'd spent enough time around soldiers to recognize the signs of someone carrying too much weight on their own shoulders. The way she held herself, the careful isolation, the perpetually guarded expression, it all spoke of exhaustion that went deeper than physical fatigue. He ran his fingers along one of the deeper plasma burns, feeling the rough edges where the alien metal had boiled away under enemy fire. Somewhere out there in the contested zones, this armor had kept its wearer alive through what must have been hell itself. The least he could do was show it the respect it deserved. David wheeled over his workstation and began laying out the specialized tools he'd need for this kind of restoration. Valdari biotech required different approaches than human equipment, gentler, more intuitive methods that worked with the material's semi-organic properties rather than forcing purely mechanical solutions. He started with the chest plate, using sonic cleaners to remove layers of carbon scoring and battlefield grime. Underneath the damage, the armor's natural luster began to emerge, revealing intricate patterns that seemed to shift and flow like liquid starlight. David found himself mesmerized by the interplay of form and function, the way each curve served both aesthetic and protective purposes. The plasma burns required more delicate work. David heated specialized compounds that bonded at the molecular level with Valdari alloys, filling the gaps and smoothing the rough edges until the repairs were nearly invisible. He'd learned these techniques from technical manuals and maintenance databases, but applying them felt almost ceremonial, like participating in some ancient ritual of renewal. Hours passed unnoticed as David lost himself in the work. Each repaired section revealed new details, microscopic engravings that might have been decorative or functional, bioneural pathways that showed how the armor interfaced with its wearer's nervous system, adaptive elements that would customize protection based on combat conditions. As dawn approached and the first shift change of the day began stirring throughout the base, David stepped back to evaluate his progress. The chest plate gleamed like new, its surface reflecting the workshop lights and patterns that seemed almost alive. The shoulder guards were next, then the arm sections, then the complex articulation systems that allowed full mobility without sacrificing protection. He estimated another week of night shifts to complete the full restoration, assuming no emergency repairs interrupted his schedule. The work called to him in ways that routine maintenance never did. This wasn't just about fixing broken equipment, but about returning something precious to the warrior who'd earned the right to wear it with pride. David glanced toward the main corridor where early risers were beginning their daily routines, wondering if Commander Silesthera knew her armor was here. Did she think it beyond repair? Had she given up on the gear that had carried her through so many battles? He shook his head and returned to his work. Questions could wait. Right now, he had a masterpiece to restore. The second night brought new challenges as David tackled the armor's damaged servo systems. Valdari biotech integration meant these weren't simple mechanical joints, they were living interfaces that adapted to their wearers' movements and anticipations. Repairing them required patience and an understanding of alien physiology that David was acquiring through late-night research sessions. Working late again, Park. Sergeant Williams called out as he passed through the maintenance bay on his security rounds. Someone's got to keep the lights on, David replied without looking up from the delicate neural pathway he was reconstructing. The Valdari equivalent of circuit boards were more like crystalline nerve clusters, requiring tools that barely existed in human technology. Williams paused to examine the armor laid out on David's workbench. That's some serious battle damage. Whose gear are you fixing? Commander Silesthera's, David said, using a micro-welder to fuse a damaged bioconnector. Found it abandoned in storage. Ha! Williams studied the gleaming chest plate that David had completed the previous night. Didn't know anyone could fix Valdari tech. Thought their stuff was too advanced for human tools. Everything's fixable if you understand how it works, David replied. Just takes time to learn the patterns. After Williams continued his rounds, David returned to his research. The base's xenobiology database contained scattered references to Valdari armor traditions, painting a picture of equipment that was far more than protective gear. Among their people, battle armor was considered sacred, a second skin that developed psychic resonance with its wearer over years of combat. Some sets were passed down through warrior lineages for centuries, accumulating the experiences and instincts of multiple generations. The implications made David's restoration work feel even more significant. This wasn't just about repairing equipment, he was handling something that might be irreplaceable in ways that human military thinking couldn't fully appreciate. As he worked on the shoulder articulation systems, David began to notice patterns in the damage distribution. The heaviest scoring was concentrated on the right side, suggesting a warrior who favored aggressive close-quarters tactics. Plasma burns clustered around the heart and head indicated someone who drew enemy fire deliberately, possibly to protect others. The claw marks told stories of hand-to-hand combat with Vex drones, battles fought at distances where most humans would have been overwhelmed. David found himself building a mental picture of Commander Silesthera's fighting style, bold, protective, and willing to accept personal risk for tactical advantage. It matched his observations of her leadership during briefings, where she consistently volunteered for the most dangerous assignments while ensuring her human allies had optimal support. The third night brought an unexpected visitor. David was deep in concentration, rebuilding the armor's heads-up display system, when he sensed someone watching from the maintenance bay's entrance. He looked up to find Commander Silesthera herself, her tall frame silhouetted against the corridor lighting. Senior Mechanic Park, she said formally, her accent giving the words a musical quality despite their military precision. Commander, David replied, suddenly conscious of how the restored armor sections were spread across his workstation like pieces of an elaborate puzzle. I, found your gear in storage. Thought it deserved better than the scrap heap. Silesthera approached slowly, her crystalline skin shifting to deeper blue tones that David's research told him indicated surprise or uncertainty. She moved with the fluid grace that all Valdari possessed, but David noticed a weariness in her posture that spoke of more than physical exhaustion. You have been working on my armor, she observed, running her fingers along the restored chest plate with obvious wonder. For how long? 3 nights so far. Figure I need another 4 or 5 to complete the full restoration. David gestured at the remaining damaged sections. The bioneural interfaces are tricky, but I think I've figured out the repair protocols. Why? The question was soft, almost tentative. David paused in his work, studying her expression. Up close, he could see the toll that months of combat had taken. Her skin's natural luminescence was muted, and her eyes held the distant look of someone who'd seen too much violence. Because it's beautiful work, he said simply. And because you deserve equipment that works at peak efficiency. This armor's been through hell keeping you alive, seemed like the least I could do was show it some appreciation. Silasthara's skin shifted to warmer gold tones, the first time David had seen her display anything other than the muted grays and blues that seemed to be her default setting on the base. Among my people, she said carefully, armor maintenance is considered a sacred duty. Warriors tend their own gear, or trusted family members assist. It is not work for strangers. David felt his heart sink. I'm sorry, Commander. I didn't mean to overstep any cultural boundaries. If you'd prefer to handle the repairs yourself. No. The word came quickly, almost urgently. I did not mean to suggest offense. Only, surprise. It has been many months since anyone showed my equipment such care. She paused, studying his face. Or showed me such consideration. The admission hung in the air between them, revealing a loneliness that David recognized from his own experiences with military life. He'd seen it in soldiers who'd been deployed too long, officers who'd been promoted beyond their peer groups, specialists whose expertise isolated them from normal social bonds. Well, David said, returning to his work on the display systems, consider it professional courtesy. One tech appreciating another's craftsmanship. Silasthara watched him work for several minutes in comfortable silence, occasionally asking technical questions about his repair methods or offering insights into Valdari biotech principles. David found her presence oddly soothing. She understood the meditative quality of precision work, the satisfaction of returning broken things to wholeness. When she finally left to continue her evening duties, the maintenance bay felt emptier somehow. David realized he was looking forward to tomorrow night's work session, hoping she might return to continue their conversation about the intersection of technology and artistry in Valdari culture. For the first time since beginning the restoration project, David wondered if he was fixing more than just armor. The fourth night, Silasthara returned as David had hoped she would. This time, she brought 2 cups of what she called Kithra tea, a Valdari beverage that tasted like liquid starlight and caffeine had been merged by a benevolent cosmic force. David accepted the offering gratefully, recognizing the gesture as significant in ways he was only beginning to understand. Your people have an expression, she said, settling into a nearby chair while David worked on the armor's leg servos. Actions speak louder than words. Yeah, though sometimes we're not great at listening to either, David replied, testing the newly calibrated joint articulation. These servo responses are incredible, by the way. The reaction time is almost instantaneous. Valdari biotech anticipates movement based on neural patterns, Silasthara explained. The armor learns its wearer's combat style and provides assistance before conscious thought completes the action. It becomes part of you. David glanced at her, noting the wistful tone in her voice. When did you last wear it? 6 weeks ago. After the Vex breakthrough at Sector 7. Her skin shifted to darker hues. My squad held the line while civilian transports evacuated, but the damage to my gear was extensive. I assumed it was beyond repair. What were you planning to do without it? Silasthara was quiet for a long moment, watching David's careful work on the complex joint mechanisms. Request transfer to rear echelon duties. Perhaps training assignments on safer worlds. The resignation in her voice caught David off guard. Everything he'd observed about the commander suggested someone who lived for tactical challenges and frontline leadership. That doesn't sound like you. How would you know what sounds like me? The question wasn't hostile, just genuinely curious. David considered his answer carefully. I've watched you in briefings. You volunteer for the hardest assignments, ask for the most dangerous sectors, and your tactical recommendations save lives. Someone doesn't build that kind of reputation by playing it safe. Perhaps I am tired of being the only one willing to take those risks. The honesty in her admission made David pause in his work. He set down his tools and gave her his full attention. Is that what you think? That you're the only one willing to fight? Silas Theroux's crystalline skin rippled with conflicting colors. On my homeworld, warriors fight alongside their clanmates, people who understand the poetry of battle, the art of coordinated movement. Here, I am surrounded by competent soldiers who see only the mechanical aspects of war. They follow my tactics because they work, not because they understand the beauty in perfect execution. David nodded slowly. You're homesick. I am isolated, she corrected. There is a difference between missing one's home and feeling disconnected from one's purpose. So why not request transfer? Go back to fighting with your own people. Because this is where I am needed. Her skin shifted to determined gold tones. The Vex represent an existential threat to all sentient life. Personal comfort is irrelevant compared to that reality. David resumed his work on the leg servos, processing her words. You know, isolation doesn't have to mean disconnection. Explain. Look around this base. 3,000 humans, 50 alien allies from a dozen different species, all working toward the same goal. Sure, we don't all fight the same way or see the same beauty in our tactics, but we're here. Together. That has to count for something. Silas Theroux considered this. Your maintenance work, do you find poetry in it? Honestly? Yeah. There's something satisfying about taking broken things and making them whole again. Understanding how all the pieces fit together, why each component matters to the overall function. David held up one of the newly repaired servos. Take this joint, it's not just about mechanical movement. It has to integrate with bioneural pathways, respond to emotional states, anticipate combat needs. That's not just engineering. That's art. For the first time since he'd known her, Silas Theroux smiled, not the polite expression she wore during official functions, but something genuine and warm that made her entire face luminescent. You understand, she said softly. I try to. David returned his attention to the servo calibration. And I think more people here understand than you realize. They might not express it the same way your clanmates would, but they see your skill. They trust your judgment. That's why they follow your tactics, not just because they work, but because they trust you. Trust is not the same as connection. No, but it's a starting point. David finished the servo repairs and moved to the helmet systems. Question for you, when you wear this armor, do you feel alone? Silas Theroux tilted her head, considering. No. The bioneural connection creates a sense of unity between warrior and equipment. We become part of a larger whole. Maybe that's what you need to find here. Not the same connections you had at home, but new ones that work with who you are now and what this place needs. She watched him work on the helmet's damaged faceplate, using delicate tools to rebuild the transparent aluminum viewport. Is that what you have done? Found connection in this place? David thought about his solitary night shifts, his preference for working alone, his tendency to avoid the social aspects of base life. I'm working on it. This conversation, for instance, best part of my week so far. Silas Theroux's laughter was like crystal chimes in a gentle wind. You are very strange for a human, David Park. Thanks, David replied, grinning. That might be the nicest thing anyone said to me in months. As she prepared to leave for her evening duties, Silas Theroux paused at the maintenance bay entrance. Tomorrow night, would you like me to show you proper Valdari armor fitting procedures? There are calibration steps that even your excellent research might have missed. David looked up from his work, seeing the tentative hope in her expression. I'd like that. Fair warning though, I ask a lot of technical questions. I would be disappointed if you did not, she replied, her skin glowing with warm golden hues that transformed her entire appearance. After she left, David found himself working with renewed energy. Tomorrow night's session felt like more than just equipment maintenance, it felt like the beginning of the connection they'd both been missing. The fifth night marked a turning point that neither David nor Silesthera had anticipated. She arrived at the maintenance bay carrying not just tea, but a small device that hummed with subtle harmonics, a Valdari biocalibrator that would ensure perfect integration between armor and wearer. The final fitting requires both technical precision and intuitive understanding, she explained, activating the device. Your restoration work has been exemplary, but the armor must remember its wearer's neural patterns. David watched in fascination as she began donning the restored pieces, each section flowing into place with organic grace. The armor seemed to come alive as it recognized its former occupant, bioluminescent pathways lighting up in complex patterns that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. Incredible, David murmured, noting how the joints adjusted automatically to her specific proportions and movement preferences. It really is like watching something wake up. In many ways, it is, Silesthera replied, testing the servo responses with a series of fluid movements. Valdari armor bonds with its wearer over time, becoming an extension of their will and instincts. The fitting process took nearly an hour, with Silesthera explaining each calibration step while David documented the procedures for future reference. Their conversation flowed easily between technical details and cultural insights, creating the kind of collaborative working relationship that David had rarely experienced. There, Silesthera said finally, completing a graceful combat stance that demonstrated the armor's full range of motion. Perfect integration. Your restoration has exceeded all expectations. David felt a surge of professional pride, but also something deeper, satisfaction that came from helping someone reclaim something precious they'd thought was lost forever. How does it feel? Like coming home, she replied, her voice carrying notes of genuine emotion. I had forgotten what it felt like to be complete. Their moment of shared accomplishment was interrupted by the base's emergency alert system. Red warning lights bathed the maintenance bay as Commander Torres's voice echoed through the communications array, all personnel to battle stations. Vex assault detected on approach Vector 7. This is not a drill. David felt his stomach drop. Approach Vector 7 covered the civilian refugee camp that Forward Base Titan was protecting, 15,000 non-combatants who couldn't evacuate quickly enough to escape a Vex assault force. Silesthera was already moving, her restored armor responding to her urgency with fluid efficiency. David, can you access the base's defensive grid from here? Yeah, but why? Understanding hit him like a plasma bolt. You want to integrate the armor's biotech with our defense systems. The armor can interface with any compatible technology. If we can establish a neural link between my combat processors and the base's targeting systems, we could coordinate defensive fire with unprecedented precision. David's hands flew over his workstation, pulling up system schematics and looking for integration points. This is completely theoretical. We've never tried connecting Valdari biotech with human military networks. Theory becomes practice under necessity, Silesthera replied, moving to stand beside his workstation. What do you need from me? The next 20 minutes became a blur of improvised engineering as David jury-rigged connections between Silesthera's armor systems and the base's defensive grid. Outside, the sound of incoming artillery and defensive countermeasures created a percussion symphony of war that made concentration nearly impossible. Neural link established, David announced as the final connections came online. You should have direct access to targeting data and defensive positioning. Silesthera closed her eyes, her armor's bioluminescent patterns shifting to deep blue as she interfaced with the base's systems. When she opened them again, her expression had changed to something David had never seen before, not just tactical awareness, but genuine joy. I can see everything, she whispered. Every defensive position, every firing solution, every movement pattern. It's like conducting an orchestra of destruction. Through the maintenance bay's reinforced windows, David watched the battle unfold with mechanical precision that bordered on artistry. The base's defensive batteries moved in perfect synchronization, creating overlapping fields of fire that channeled the Vex assault into predetermined killing zones. Plasma cannon volleys timed their firing sequences to create cascading explosions that maximized damage while conserving ammunition. "You're turning this into a dance," David observed, watching the tactical display show Vex forces being systematically dismantled by coordinated defensive fire. "All warfare is dance," Silasthara replied, her armor glowing brighter as she processed targeting data faster than human systems could display it. "The difference between good tactics and art is whether you can find beauty in the pattern." The battle lasted 3 hours, ending with the complete destruction of the Vex assault force and 0 casualties among the base's defenders or the refugee population. As the all-clear signal sounded, Silasthara disconnected from the defensive grid and turned to David with an expression of pure gratitude. "Your restoration gave me more than armor," she said. "It gave me purpose again." "You always had purpose," David replied. "I just helped you remember what it felt like to not carry it alone." The weeks that followed brought significant changes to Forward Base Titan. Silasthara's biotech integration techniques were adopted as standard defensive protocols, turning every engagement into the kind of coordinated artistry that Valdari culture celebrated. More importantly, her success opened doors for other alien specialists to share their unique perspectives with human tactical doctrine. David found his maintenance bay becoming an informal meeting ground where different species compared notes on technology and technique. His nightly restoration projects expanded to include equipment from throughout the Alliance, each repair job teaching him new approaches to the art of making broken things whole again. "You realize," Silasthara said one evening as they worked together on a damaged Altarian exosuit, "you have become something of a cultural ambassador." David looked around the maintenance bay, noting the diverse group of technicians and warriors who now gathered there regularly to share knowledge and stories. "I think we both have." "Indeed." Her skin glowed with warm gold satisfaction. "Though I suspect your approach is more effective than traditional diplomacy." "How so?" Silasthara gestured at the restored armor that had started their friendship. "You showed me that I mattered by treating my equipment as if it mattered. Simple recognition of worth, expressed through practical action." David nodded, understanding. Everyone wants to know their contribution means something. Sometimes you just have to show them through how you handle what they've given. Exactly. She paused in her work to study his face. "Thank you, David Park, for treating me like I matter." "Thank you," David replied, "for letting me be part of something bigger than repair work." As they returned to their collaborative restoration of alien technology, the maintenance bay hummed with the sounds of different species working together toward common goals. Outside, the war continued, but inside this small space, connections were being forged that would outlast any conflict, bonds built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and the simple recognition that everyone, regardless of species or background, deserved to be treated like they mattered.